Sandy Garza, welcome to the Tiger Den.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So I've done a lot of research about you.
Lovely.
We talked last week for a period of time, just to kind of get to know each other, and you are heavily involved in several different, you get your fingers in a bunch of different places in Peoria.
Absolutely. Love it.
Yeah, kind of for the people listening, go ahead and explain kind of what your main job is, what your side business is, kind of what you do.
Absolutely. I'd love to. So I've been in Peoria since 2004, and I fell in love with the city and how generous and giving and how much we really take care of each other and the incredible business owners in it. When I first came to Peoria, I worked in corporate insurance, and so I was able to meet all kinds of business owners in the area, and I learned very quickly how giving and how much the business owners support our community efforts. With that, my life trajectory and career changed, and I became a foster mother, and I did that for 2.5 years. It was wonderful.
In Peoria you were?
In Peoria.
Yeah. So you worked with the Child and Family Services, or who did you work with to do foster parenting?
I was contacted through a company called Babyfold. It was actually out of Bloomington, but we lived in East Peoria at the time.
Got it. Yeah, I'm from East Peoria. Where did you live?
Stony Brook subdivision across from ICC.
Yeah, I'm from East Peoria, but I grew up near ICC as well, up of Oak Brook.
Oh yeah, that's
and
right.
Highview.
Very close.
Yeah,
very close.
Yeah.
I walked there. Yeah.
Nice. So you fostered 3 kids?
3 children, all under the age of 5, for 2.5 years.
Oh, brothers and sisters, I'm assuming.
Yep, a sibling group. Mm-hmm. And it was life-changing and eye-opening for me because I got to see the impact you can have on a child's life, but also all the different facets of the systems available to support and pieces you run into. All that to say that when they went home, I found myself wanting to go back to work and find a position that would be able to use my skill set to improve the lives of children, right? Mm. And I found this wonderful opportunity. I was able to work at Crittenton Centers, which has the crisis nursery, and they work really close with parents to help them succeed, for about 8 years as the fundraising and development director there.
So Crittenton Center, I knew somebody who worked at Crittenton Center as like a child care. They worked with the kids directly. You were like admin to raise money for the center itself.
Yes, I was the director of marketing and development. So that's the PR piece as well as the fundraising, events and donor relations and all of those pieces. Yeah.
I've seen many billboards of Crittenton Center.
Yes.
I can see in my head, they had like the spots of colors in Crittenton Center, I think.
Yes.
So you created some of that. Or you were part of it.
I left since the ones you've seen recently, but I did the ones that you probably saw the first time.
Got it. Okay.
With the team. But I in January of 23 started my own business to help local business owners with their fundraising efforts and to support nonprofits in their fundraising efforts as a consultant. Mm. And it's been wonderful for the last couple of years. I've got to meet and work with some incredible people and raise a lot of money to help our community.
Awesome.
All while in the last 2 years, I've also served as the president of the Junior League of Peoria. And I joined Junior League when I first came to Peoria. Mm. Been in it for a little over 15 years now, coming up on my 2nd year of presidency. And I am so proud and impressed with the team that I work with and what the history of the league has been in Peoria and what we're going to do in the future, right? Most people, I think, they've heard of the Junior League, but they don't necessarily know exactly what it does.
Sure.
And it's a league of women who come together to better their communities, but ultimately set ourselves up to learn how to do civic leadership within our own communities. Right?
Explain civic leadership. That term speaks like politics to me, or like some kind of like local engagement.
Understood.
Yeah. So like explain civic leadership.
So nonpartisan, first of all, we are nonpartisan, but essentially, for example, we always want to improve our community. So some of our historical projects you might have heard of, the Peoria Playhouse. Yeah. We fundraised and built the Playhouse as a league in partnership with the Zoology Society. Took several years to fundraise and build, and as soon as it was completed, we then handed it over to the Peoria Park District for them to run effectively. We built...
Are you handing it over with money in the bank to kind of run those programs since you've fundraised the cash for it?
Absolutely. Not forever, right? But for the first, approximately the first year.
So it's the idea of the program, but it's also the means to make it happen.
Yes. So we fundraised, we contracted the designers, we built the building, all the pieces, we had that all coordinated, and we did not cut the ribbon and hand it over until that was all complete, and to the piece of supporting, finding the executive director, all those pieces,
Sure.
right?
So it's setting them up for success, not just like coming up with an idea and then giving it to somebody. It's like setting up with a organization, executive leadership, and then saying, here, you can take it over and then run it, and they can take it over. And
Absolutely. And we've done this before. Some of our other famous projects are the Family House, which was the original Ronald McDonald type house in Peoria to support the families of the hospitals.
And that's still running.
It's still running to this day. We've also done other pieces that weren't necessarily building projects, but projects that were fundraisers and stigma changer, like change the stigma around. I think our most famous project is the Race for the Cure, because Susan G. Coleman was a member of the Peoria Junior League. Right. And so her sister started that first race in Dallas, and then her friends from the league brought it back to Peoria. And Peoria for 8 years straight was one of the biggest fundraising areas for Race for the Cure and breast cancer research and reducing the stigma. And then we handed it over to the Coleman affiliate after about 8 years.
Coleman affiliate took over, and now they just run it.
Yes, it's all theirs now.
So it's almost like you're starting programs with the intention to pass them off someday. Trying to find organizations that would find it and say, this is a worthy cause, let's keep going.
That is exactly what the goal is. And so when people join the Junior League, they have to be at least 21 years old, different place in life. And you're promising to volunteer not only to do the work, but to do the work behind the scenes that sets up other people for success, right? So developing that concept, because when you want to build a museum, it's not just about how much is it going to cost, how to fundraise it, and who the designer is going to be. You have to work with local officials. You have to work with the community to see if there's a need for it, a buy-in for it, all those pieces that work within our local community to see what we can do, right? Yeah. And so that same concept was applied with the Family House. We've built playgrounds. The Tricentennial Playground was built. We partnered with the city, of course. We had volunteers. We worked on grant funding. We did all of those things to build the Tricentennial Playground. It's since been taken down over 30 years. It was up. That, if you remember, my fellow Peorians, it was in the Park District and it was made out of wood.
Yes.
Okay, that was the
I've taken my kids to that.
Yes.
It's now been taken down.
It's been taken down and replaced by a beautiful, more accessible playground, which it should. It was 30 years of wood playground. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, it made a huge difference for a long time.
So that was built by the Junior League? Or by an organization that was...
With us. We don't have to take all credit for anything. We got grants and loans and support, but we coordinated behind the scenes. One of our most recent ones is during COVID, we were actually focusing on food insecurity. So we partnered with the city and the U of I with their gardeners to set up a community garden that is now still established, right? And we passed that on to the local organization to run it. Now that it's all established and the grants have been created and the beds have been made and all the stuff has been established, then we pass it on.
So there's got to be a bandwidth of how many projects you would take on per year, just because this sounds this is not just like a volunteer organization. It is volunteer, but there's a lot of, this sounds like a lot of moving parts.
It is.
You guys pick one project a year to kind of focus on and then develop?
One a year or every 3 years, I'd say. And I would, at full transparency, the museum was a lot more than 3 years to get that done. Yeah. That being said, our current initiative is to focus on increasing youth mental health in the Tri-County area, youth mental health education. The United Way does an incredible job of community needs assessment in our area to see what is needed. And so through that information, we're able to determine what the greatest need is and then how we can come aside and do that. And
so there's like reporting that comes out that says this is a huge need in the central Illinois area.
Yes.
And then you take those things and say, okay, what are we going to focus on?
Absolutely. Yeah. And our membership votes on that and determines what we're going to do. And so after all that research brought forth, and I mean, everybody knows that mental health was affecting kids after COVID and the schools and all the things. This is not rocket science to know that it affected the children.
Yes.
That being said, I also don't think doing nothing or thinking it's too big of a problem, right?
Right.
So, and we're not the only ones working on this. Oh my goodness. We have OSF is working on it. Trillium's working on it. Carl through Trillium is working on it, building these facilities. But everyone we talked to essentially said, we could build 100 beds. We could fill them all. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there's more need than can be filled.
Yes.
We are not in the Junior League therapist or psychologist, and we don't have that particular
you're
letter.
Like professional problem solvers.
Yeah. So what we did is we recognized there was a great program already established for mental health, supporting parents through the United Way. It was called Healthy Minds, Healthy Neighborhoods. They created it after actually the Washington tornado, and they had leftover funding, and they saw this need. So they created an entire program to help under age of 5, elementary and high school kids. And it's not just to help necessarily how the kids can deal with it. It's truthfully how to teach the parents how to train their children.
Yeah.
And how to work with their children. Because the research from when I was a kid is different on how they were telling us what worked and what didn't work. We know so much more now.
Yeah.
And COVID, of course, changed that as well and gave us more information.
Social media,
yeah. All kinds of things. And so we're excited. There's this great program, but the United Way had partners with all the health departments, all these things, and COVID, it kind of stopped happening.
I see.
Right? And so they had this complete evidence-based program that they were running that was kind of shelved because they didn't have a partner.
Well, they didn't have like the bandwidth to handle it.
Right.
So they're just like, we just can't do it that much. Yeah.
So
that's fantastic.
We're like, this is the perfect, we don't have to create a program because we're not those people, but we're taking it now and we're running it at the Peoria Playhouse, our long-term partner, right? So we do, right now it's going to be March 5th, 19th, and April 2nd, Wednesday evenings from 5 to 6:30. Free to parents. They come, they can take the class. It's on self-regulation, decision-making, building relationships, social awareness, self-awareness. And the kids get to play all over the Playhouse.
Yeah.
And they're entertained by Junior League members. The Junior League members have been trained by the people at the United Way of how to do the program. We train the parents, and that by itself is truly the best way to sometimes help a child is to help their parents succeed.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to do, right? We're all in this together. It takes a village. And I always tell people, you can take the tools from this toolbox and you know your child better than anybody. Maybe this one doesn't apply. Don't use that one, right? So we are very excited about that, but we know that you have to do more than that. So we're also fundraising, and we're providing social emotional learning funding for the local schools. So they can have a dog at their school or yoga for the kids, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
It all costs money.
It all costs money. And, you know, a program to be celebrated. And I know that as adults, we need appreciation even at work.
Sure.
Right? So let's give that to the kids and the parents. And in addition to that, which I'm really excited about the Junior League is doing this year, is we've started back in our Illinois SPAC, which is the Special Political Action Committee, nonpartisan again. And essentially the Junior Leagues, including the one in Chicago, are coming together and going to go to the Capitol on April 9th to promote feedback for laws that are on the books that are helping to increase youth mental health education.
So you guys are digging through legislation to say, like, this is what's helping, this is what's not, this is what we can fund. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we're working, and the truth is, the Junior League used to do this several years ago. It just started up this ILSPAC again because Chicago's on board, and because we're Illinois, we need Chicago on board. But there's multiple leagues. So our league has 250 members. Chicago's, of course, is much larger, and we all send representatives on April 9th.
Are you looking forward to that?
I'm very much looking forward to that.
Your term as president ends when?
June 1st.
So it's coming up here in the next few months.
Mm-hmm.
Take me back to when you first got elected. I'm sure there's some trepidation because were you on executive leadership before?
Yeah.
Okay. But take me to like a lesson you learned taking over as being president that you kind of have gained over this last year and a half coming from executive leadership to president.
I think the biggest lesson I've learned, and I think the biggest role for any leader, is it's not really my job to decide unless the people on the leadership team can't come to a consensus. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I try really hard to provide all the information possible to the leadership team and have healthy discussion and evidence-based information before we make our decisions. And typically I come in to be a tiebreaker, shall we say, after the decision is completely made.
It's really difficult. I mean, I consider myself a doer. And
yes.
So leading a company, this is our 5th year in business, and I've learned a lot about leadership in these past 5 years. But now this year, I'm taking a massive step back from major decision-making and passing it off to my leaders. And then in the back channels, you're influencing decisions. You're helping kind of gauge where the decision is at and trying to help the leaders make the decisions. But ultimately, it's out of your hands in a sense. It's hard to do that.
Yes,
as
it's
a doer,
very hard. It's very hard.
Okay, this is my baby, but I'm willing to be a little bit, hands off to let my leaders grow in that sense. So it's difficult.
It is difficult. And something I would say that I think is different between being a business owner and being a leader of a volunteer organization. So as a business owner, you have your employees and you pay them and they signed up for these pieces, right?
Yep.
And when you're in volunteer work, whether that be with the Junior League or in other jobs, essentially the way that they are paid, if we can call it that, is the inclusion and ability to make a difference and knowing you're part of that,
yes.
right? So I think when you're leading a group of volunteers, it's a different type of leadership. It's truly galvanizing the team, which everybody galvanizes, right? But the galvanizing and including and collaboration becomes the secret sauce to getting the momentum from the entire group to do it, right? Because if you're in charge and you're just like, this is what we're going to do, and nobody wants to do it, and they're all volunteers, guess what happens?
Nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
Yeah. No, that's true. Creating momentum and creating synergy with your team is like your goal. It's your task.
Yes.
But you can't do that by just saying, this is where we're going and this is what you're going to do. It's like you have to create buy-in by having them come up with the idea themselves, and having that even from the employees at the bottom, in the sense that they don't have decision-making power, getting them galvanized to actually do this stuff. Right. So it takes a lot of jockeying to make sure you're leading your team well and they feel like they're responsible for the results.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just listening and doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I find, and maybe you found this, I think this applies to business, is that I try to surround myself with people who have different strengths, right? So if this is, this person's really good at public speaking and this person's really good at policy reading, for a different SPAC or whatever, you want to surround yourself with a complete team of all different variable talents and aspects and assets that they bring to the table, and acknowledge those, right? And make it a safe place for them to say, that's not my area of expertise.
Yeah.
So then you really create that collaboration, and then people feel ready and able to ask for help, and they seek positive feedback and negative feedback, which is very rare to have people seek negative feedback. But when you're in a safe enough space, you're like, does this work or not? And they feel safe to say that. Yeah.
And then take the loss, so to speak, to say, I thought this originally, but I'm actually rethinking it. Now I think this. Right?
Yes,
and
exactly.
They feel comfortable enough to say, I really judge this wrong, or it takes a really unique atmosphere to have people interact that way. Absolutely. Otherwise, they feel defensive and they'll say, like, well, my idea didn't work, and therefore I'm not going to work as hard to carry it out because it's not mine.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's been the key, right? Because the big mission of all the things that we've done, if you look back, I'm sure everybody didn't think these were the different snacks to have at the at the end of the race or whatever it was, right? I'm sure there was things. But when I was able to host the event for the Junior League at the museum, honoring the women who came before and the projects that were completed, that's not what is brought forth to the community, right?
Yeah.
It's the result. It's the lasting impact of all the lives changed.
They don't remember the snacks. They're not talking about the snacks, no.
No,
but
they don't.
That might be something that your team talks about, right? It's like micro focusing on everything that might have went wrong. Yeah.
And those are the things you have to let somebody else make the decision on and be okay with. And so that's been really, great.
Yeah. Fulfilling, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I get to work with incredible women. These are, the majority of the women in the league have full-time careers and families. And this is a piece of their lives where they get to try something they don't do at work, for example, and then they get to be part of this bigger mission. So maybe I'm an accountant at work, but I don't want to be a treasurer in the Junior League. I want to be the marketing person or whatever, and you get to try that out, right? So once again, that safe space. And then maybe you feel confident, and now you're joining the board at your local museum or your PTO, and now you're making a long-lasting civic impact because I have the skill set to do these meetings and to call the right people and to take action and have something happen.
And it's all networking, right?
Absolutely.
It's like everything is networking and finding the right people for everything in your company or nonprofit. It's all about knowing who can move the needle in certain areas.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have to trust each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's take it back to your foster care experience. You didn't have kids of your own when you were a foster mother, right?
Correct.
So you went from no kids to 3 kids almost overnight.
Literally overnight.
Scary, I'm sure.
Yes.
What are some of the lessons you learned about being a foster mom through that experience?
a lot of incredible people say yes to becoming foster parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a big, brave thing to say yes to, right? Because there's so many unknowns, right? I also learned about the support system for foster care families, what they have accessible to, what they don't have accessible to them. I learned about Easter seals. I learned about having to go to court and all the rules that are put on foster parents and all those pieces, right? And I think the biggest, and the three that I worked with had a wonderful, happy ending. They were able to go home and be with their mom. And that was the ultimate goal for all of us. And that was a very happy ending for them. And it was incredibly hard for me.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest lesson for me. And the bigger piece of that was I truly wanted what was best for them. But that being said, you have to be able to separate. And I think some people are afraid because of that fear of, giving them back and how that's going to go and what the unknowns and all those pieces. And I think what I learned, to hit your point, the biggest lesson is no matter how great of a foster parent or mother I was, they ultimately wanted to be home with their mom.
Sure.
That was their happy ending. They didn't want a perfect mom. They didn't want everything wonderful. They wanted to be home. Yeah. And we were able to make that happen. And I think that's true for people who are being brave enough to say yes to being foster parents or the parents who are working hard to get their children back. They don't expect perfection. They just want you present.
Sure. Social media has created a tremendous amount of pressure on parents, in my opinion, because there's so many opinions about how to raise kids, and certain people do this, certain people do the opposite. It's almost like 50 years ago you had almost no information, and now you have all the information, and it's like, well, there's a bunch of different opinions, so how do we choose what is right and what is wrong? It's created pressure to think like, I'm not a perfect parent because this person says you shouldn't do this.
Yes.
Right? And so it's become, I think, challenging in that sense where we have this added pressure of the public's judgment of how you parent.
Oh, of course. And what you post, right? And what you do. And that's even, that microscopic feeling that you're talking about is probably what a lot of those parents that have had their children removed have at an even higher level, if you can imagine. Because these people are literally coming to their home and they're taking parenting classes and they're doing all these things, and they know that they're being monitored, shall we say, right? For their parenting ability. And the majority of people who find themselves probably in the foster care realm didn't maybe have good examples themselves. Yeah. Right? And so you when you know better, you do better, but then you have to be willing to say, maybe I need to know better. Right? And even for us who are maybe not in the foster care realm, like you're saying, social media, the feedback we get as parents, and that's so hard because there's not many parents I've ever met that don't want to do the best for their children. Right. But when you have that much information coming at you, it's almost, you can shut down. Yes. And be done. And like, this is what I'm going to do and this is why. Right? It's fight or flight mode. Yes. Like, I'm just going to take a step back and, run from my responsibility. It's got to be really difficult, especially because I would assume most foster parents have really hard circumstances they're dealing with that they feel like they're out of control. And so their kids are essentially like, a proximity problem. It's like they see their kids as like, this is a really hard, I'm dealing with something outside of the home that's really difficult, and my kids are now being affected by this. And then the foster, the authorities come in and remove their kids. It's got to be really humbling and very difficult to deal with. Absolutely. And I believe that the kids ultimately want to be home with their parents. Mm-hmm. And I believe that if we can truly help the parents succeed, we help the entire family and the next generation, right? What's the stats, Sandy, if you can enlighten us on foster parents and the need for foster parents right now? Is there a massive need? I would assume it is. There is a massive need. I do not have exact statistics for you. I could probably get them from Family Corps. But essentially, it's not a secret. It's been the news lately that we are overflooding with children that need places to go. And when that happens, placements are not as strategic, right? Yeah. And I think they recently, I saw on the news, we can look it up, but they just signed in about having to choose relative foster care first. I see. It just came out. I think it was signed in, which is great if it's available, right? It's wonderful. And there's other opportunities and most children who are in foster care, even if they didn't have anything wrong, whatever, the process itself of being removed and going into foster care can cause emotional pain, as you can imagine, which probably requires some professional help. Right. So there's layers of this too. It's not just a home, but there's this emotional repair that needs to take place.
This is one thing that in the past 20 years, I feel like our society is getting more and more insulated, where it's independent, where I feel like I just perceive that the 1950s or before that, it was more community driven because you had to rely on the community. But the more we separate and kind of isolate from one another, it just becomes harder to support people because we're so insular. I mean, I have a few friends that are Mormon. They live in Utah, and the amount of, I don't know, do you know anything about the Mormon community?
A little bit. Probably you know more.
I do. I know a little bit about it, but the Mormons show up for each other in droves. It's very impressive. It's kind of like an Amish community.
Okay.
Where when you move, you'll have 30 people at your house moving your stuff. Mm-hmm. And then they help you move in. They'll bring you meals. Same with pregnancy. It's very impressive. Same with Amish people. They just like count on each other. Where I feel like if you're not a part of a church organization or some kind of community, you can easily be lost in the shuffle of life. And you're just on your own unless you have really good family support. And so for people that don't have good family support, that are going through stuff, it just feels like overwhelming. It's like, how do you live? How do you cope?
And to your point, I mean, the loneliness, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say one of the pieces that's been so beautiful at our first round of Healthy Minds, Healthy Neighborhoods that we did at Playhouse, when we had the parents in the room, we do maybe 5 or 6 slides talking about the hows and whys, but the rest of the time is spent with scenarios of working with your children. What's a proper apology? What's a proper strategy? And what we found is all the parents came together and was sharing examples. And the truth is they all had good ideas. And we went through the examples and so forth. But the bigger piece for me was that they all connected. Does that make sense? Like they started to feel not alone.
Yes.
And that I'm not the only person who deals with this.
Sure.
And so that was kind of creating that community. And we've lost, to your point, we've lost so much community after COVID, right?
Yes.
And, you know, we were trying to protect our kids. I'm not judging anybody for that. That made sense. But we did lose that piece. And I'm sure there's statistics out there on what loneliness does to the body as well.
It's isolation. And it's especially after COVID. You think about work from home. You come into an office every day before COVID, and all of a sudden you went from work from office and seeing people every day to working by yourself at your home. And just human interaction is really important. And so the more we do that with each other, where we're just separating and isolating, the more problems we have, and the more we see people as enemies in a sense, as opposed to friends or community neighbor. Like one of my goals this year, Sandy, is to be a good neighbor. Like truly, we bought a house in April. We have a fantastic neighborhood. My kids and I started a business called Unicorn Garbage Cleaning. And part of it was to see my kids be entrepreneurs and actually get them out and expose them to money making and to how to run a business in a sense, like how you gain money from doing a service.
Right.
But also I got to meet all my neighbors because we went door to door to all the 50 houses in our neighborhood. It was tremendous. I got to meet them all by name, shake their hands and say, thank you for your business. And then I can wave to them when I'm coming down the street.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just being like, that's some guy that I don't really know. It's a community and neighborhoods. Back in the day, I feel like we're just tighter because you had to be. But again, with the advent of the internet, people have just become more insular by nature because we're on our phones and you can communicate on Facebook as opposed to seeing them in public. And so the more we get to know our neighbors, we had a furnace, our furnace just went down last night, unfortunately. It's freezing cold. But I texted my neighbor. I said, hey, Jeff, our furnace went out. So if you don't see us in the home, we're not dead. But this is what's happening. And he was like, hey, 10-4, I saw the truck. Hope you guys are okay. And just to have that communication. It's my next door neighbor. You know, it's like, that's important. And we should invest in those relationships because they matter.
They absolutely do. Yeah. And we have an incredible neighborhood too. Yeah. We moved before my son started kindergarten into our little street neighborhood. And I have made some dear friends. And, you know, I have a church community as well. Mm-hmm. My church community, I cannot thank them enough. When the day I got the phone call for the foster kids, they showed up. I had nothing. I came home from the emergency room visit you have to do before you're allowed to bring the kids home. And I had pack and plays and clothes and everything I needed. because they knew that I had nothing, right? Because I wasn't prepared to be a mom. I didn't have a minivan. I was not prepared. I was prepared to be emotionally there, but I didn't have all the items. So that's how they came to help. And then I had different visits even from my junior league ladies, because they knew me as this big career woman who then, with a flip of a switch, became a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids, 2 of which required lots of extra support. And they came together and they helped, right? And brought meals and support and honestly an ear to just listen.
Sure.
Right? And when I moved to this new neighborhood with my own children, we have become dear friends. We have a couple in our neighborhood who are in the military. And so one person is deployed very often. And so we support her, and she's very talented and all that, but we support her when he's deployed, right? So we'll shovel the driveway, we'll do different things, right? And that's just what you do. Yes. And so much so that I was running late. I was at a meeting one time, and she was able to run and give my son, no problem. And they all know each other, so there's no safe, stranger danger, anything like that. Right. And I know it sounds so simple and silly, but that community means so much. It gives so much structure, even for my kids, that they feel safer, right?
If they're playing in the neighborhood and they know their neighbors' names and they know their kids' names and they can, feel safe.
They know the dogs. I mean, it's so we have a joke that my daughter, who at the time was 5, walked over to the neighbor's house. She's like, "Oh, this is her house." She's like, "Let me give you the tour." And my neighbor's just looking at me. I'm like, "I guess she feels comfortable here."
Right. Valuable.
Right.
When I grew up, it was just like that. We had a guy in the neighborhood who was retired. Every time it snowed, he did everybody's driveway. It's like that was just common. So I saw that, and it's like there's a lot of value to that something happened with social media where, since we can get almost everything from our phones, and if you need a cup of sugar, you don't really borrow it from your neighbor. You just go to CVS or Dollar General, you buy it. Or you go to Amazon, you buy the thing, and then you have it shipped, whatever.
Exactly.
So it's just become this kind of insular, individual thing where we're counting on our phones to be the connector as opposed to real relationships with real people. And part of the reason I started the podcast was to communicate what's happening here in Central Illinois, because we're all in these pockets. So it's like, what's a central avenue to know what's going on? The news does a generally decent job of doing that, but also I took a marketing mass media class in college, and the first lesson we learned was, if it bleeds, it leads. It's all about what's bad that's happening. So that's what people want to tune in for. So it's like, what are we saying about the local area? You see when a business closes down in Central Illinois, you go to the comments on Facebook. People are just railing against the company. Oh, they had bad service anyways, should have shut down. It's like, no, we should actually be pushing each other up, not down. It's so easy to be negative. It's hard to push positive information and be viral in that sense. The stuff that if it bleeds, it leads. And people want to lean into the bad stuff. And it's really easy to see that.
But just like what the algorithms do to us, right?
Exactly.
We're kind of doing it to ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's biblical to be in gratitude.
Yeah.
And we have a lot to be grateful for in this community. Since I moved here for my career, but I had family that grew up in Goodfield. I had family in Canton. And a lot of people I know grew up here and got out of town. And then guess what? They had children and they all came back. Because it's all the beautiful benefits of a big city. We have the Civic Center. We have sports. We have the Chiefs local teams. We have all of these things, but we have no commute. And at the end of the day, no traffic. If you live here long enough, you can call so-and-so who knows the president of everything, right?
That's true.
And you can get things done, which is the beautiful saying that we used to have in Peoria. Does it play in Peoria, right? Because we had all the different abilities to test the market and the different people. And what I love about the area is that we are statistically, and I don't have the exact number, but we are per capita, one of the most giving areas over local areas. As a person who worked in fundraising for multiple years now, it is incredible.
Why do you think that is?
There's a lot of reasons, but I think it goes back to this feeling of we're the biggest small town you can live in. And there's so many local business owners, and there's generational businesses here. Not just Caterpillar was here as the headquarter for a long time, right? And my grandpa, my step grandpa was like, I bleed yellow. Have you heard that? Okay. Yes. So there's like 3 generations that go to work at Caterpillar. Same thing with OSF has happened in other areas, but also there's a lot of family owned businesses.
Yes.
When I did corporate insurance, a lot of the car dealers are generational, right? And I worked with them. A lot of the machine shops around town they're generational as well. And it's impressive, right? And these are people who do the things, right? And they have faith and trust in their work ethic. And, they could call the head guy at Caterpillar if they wanted to. Or same thing with, OSF has this incredible proton laser that we're one of 11 in the country.
Wow.
Like, we should be proud of that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Riverfront Museum, what they're doing there is incredible, what they're bringing to town, how they're showcasing our area and our history and what they do for the size of our city, right? And so all these people are giving to make all these things happen. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And when I would go talk to local business owners, most of the time for donations and things like that, nobody was like, "Oh, I don't want to support that," right? "Oh, I don't think we should feed hungry children." Most of them were like, "Well, I would love to do that. Let's see how we can partner in some way or another," right? Over and over and over again. I can't think of a business in Peoria that doesn't sponsor people.
No, you're absolutely right. When you feel like you know other people, you're more willing to engage in what's happening that you can help with, right? When I travel to big cities, like I've been in New York many times, I've been to Chicago obviously many times. Chicago's a bit different than New York, but New York has this feeling that it's so big and there's so much traffic and so much animosity happening and just like police cars, it just feels like you're one of millions, which you are, but it feels very angry. It's like you're angry. Because you don't know these people.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they're in my way. They're in my way. Peoria does not feel like that. It's like these people, I got to be careful about how I drive sometimes. My car is very recognizable. So I have a lead foot. Don't arrest me, police officers, but I'm having a police officer here on tomorrow.
Perfect.
A friend of mine. But yeah, I got to be careful because my perception of how I drive relates back to my business. And I want to be a benefit to the community, right? I want to be somebody who's known for giving things and for producing things as opposed to somebody who just takes. And I don't think the city of Peoria in general, it's just how we're built. If you grow up here, you just feel that. And it's part of our DNA and our culture. Yeah.
And I would say even, we can talk to our local representatives and I see them around town and they're going to the events. This is not, there's not this veil.
Nobody's too big.
No, nobody's too big to get something done, which is one of the beautiful things of why we're able to get so much done with the league and with other organizations, because you could really get to the right people and make the phone calls. And if I don't know, somebody else in the league knew them,
you can find
and we can get it done. Right. And that has been, just in my life working with donors, there's an entire community that moved to Florida. I'm not even kidding you. There's like Peoria South is what I refer to it as, right? Yeah. And they all raised their kids together, but then they didn't want to retire. They wanted to retire in Florida, so they're going to do that, right?
Sure.
So, and they still have their house here because their community's here, right? So they had to have 2 locations. And they call snowbirds. I'm sure you've heard of this.
Yeah.
And because the community is something you can't replace. It's the people, right?
Yes.
You can get a new bridge, you can get new pieces, but that community piece is what we provide, I think.
I went down to a coffee shop. I went down to South Carolina. This was years ago, 2018, 19, somewhere on there. And I went to a coffee shop in South Carolina and it was empty. So I was just talking to the business owner. I was just like, yeah, I'm here on business. And they're like, where are you from? I was like, I'm from the state of Illinois. And I was like, south of Chicago. When you meet other people, you're not going to be like, Peoria, Illinois.
Yeah, they don't know.
They're like, oh, I know Illinois. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm from a town called Peoria. They're like, no way. And I was like, way. They're like, I'm from Peoria too. And I moved down here a couple years ago. Had this great conversation, but they're like, yeah, Peoria is great. And we moved here from South Carolina for follow grandkids. But we just talked about the city, and it's like, people do come back, or they want to come back, or they have this respect for the city. So every person you talk to has this general feeling, but then what gets produced in the mass media is Peoria is lacking in this and in that, and there's shootings and there's stuff. It's like, that's not the full picture. It's just not. And so what can we do to push against that? Because Peoria has so many giving people. I know Marky Malouf, shout out, she works for, do you know her? Mm-hmm. Okay. I think she works for St. Jude. Or
you're talking about Mitchie Malouf?
Not Mitchie Malouf, Mitchie Malouf's sister.
Oh.
Marky.
Okay.
Mitchie's a great friend as well.
I was thinking of her.
Marky works for she is one of the, I think she's a fundraiser for the Memphis to Peoria run.
Oh,
she moved to Memphis. I think she worked at the hospital there, or the organization. And she's like, oh, Peoria is the most giving city that I work with. It's just like known that we're going to outgive all these other cities. There are more people, more organizations, more money, but we just give. So it's like, This is tremendous. And have you been I'm sure you've been to many fundraisers, but man, when they run out places, they're packed.
They do. And
They're
then
packed.
St. Jude, they know that Peoria, even in Memphis, they know Peoria,
Yes.
right? They know us. Like I was saying, Race for the Cure knew us, right? We were the ones that came to the table because we truly, the joy we get from giving, it's really part of like the DNA of the community, right? And I think that comes from the generation. I mean, you mentioned Maloof. He started that, right? And now generations are continuing that.
Yeah.
That he didn't just pass on his business, he passed on his integrity and his generosity and all those things, right?
I had Michie on a couple weeks ago, and she said that her grandfather, who was the mayor of Peoria, what's his name?
Jim?
Is it Jim Maloof?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I was like, am
There's
I wrong?
many Maloofs, so like they're all run together. But he used to look at the paper, and Michie told me this, that he used to look at the paper every morning, and if somebody had a wedding or a birthday or somebody, he would write them a handwritten note saying, have a great year, and just send it to them. It's like that. And he was the mayor of Peoria. It's like that was why he was so liked in Peoria, is because he created this personal connection with people, that he was not so far removed from he's the mayor and he's this big guy. Like, no, he was part of the DNA and the culture. So
he galvanized people by making them feel known.
that's it. And it feels good to have like an elected official be like, oh, this guy knows who I am. That's kind of crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And somebody that has a busy life, right?
Yeah.
And is very
Means that
accomplished.
much
It means that much more, right? And that's true for all of us. And that's what I say. So imagine like you as a business owner, you get that from a person that you respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
It means so much. And we think, and that same thing applies with the kids,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was talking to you about that. It's to be acknowledged and recognized and have that one-on-one time where it's not just orders of take action, do this, right?
Yeah.
It's that creating connection.
Yeah.
Um,
Businesses can so quickly be reduced to numbers and figures and percentages and the back end KPIs. It's just nature of the business. The more you get in and the larger you grow, it just becomes a numbers game. And I really want to protect us against that, because I tell this to business owners across the country. I've spoken at conferences and stuff, and I'll say the same thing every time. Your business is local. It's local. It's not, you're not selling roofs to America. You're selling roofs to Memphis, Tennessee, or Cleveland, Ohio, or Peoria, Illinois. So it's like, therefore, you have to be a part of the fabric in order to be successful. My grandpa was a chiropractor for many decades, and after World War II, he got his GI Bill, went to chiropractic school, and he used to adjust the grocer that he bought groceries from, and the lawyer set up his paperwork, and you name it. He was a part of the DNA and the fabric, and so you work with these people that you buy from, and I take lessons from that, because I'm like, I'm doing roofs for people that have jobs in Peoria that do X, Y, and Z. I need to be respected and known and known as a man of trust in this area. My integrity is absolutely everything to me. If I lose that, I've lost my business, especially on local level. It's everything.
and that is the gift, right, of the small town as well, right? Because we do talk to each other. Right?
Right.
We talk to each other, and the good news does spread. I think, to your point, maybe the news doesn't catch it all, but I truly see, at least where I'm at, we talk a lot about the amazing people that come alongside when they're needed most.
Right.
And that is the knowing people in the community.
That's
right.
right.
That's knowing. I met with a donor, and it was the craziest thing. She had the book that my grandmother wrote in her house.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my goodness. And
What book was that?
A Duck in My Sink.
Is that the kid's book?
Nope.
Okay.
It's a chapter book.
Cool.
And it's a story about her life when she built a house out in Lake Wildwood, which is near Varna. You know where that is?
Yes.
Okay. And so my grandmother, who went back to Eureka College and graduated when she was a grandmother to be an English teacher, wrote plays and books. And one of her first books she ever made was A Duck in My Sink, right? Published. And I guess this donor had been on the Spoon River Drive and picked it up, and it was in her house. And it was a moment for me. Such a huge, not just a connection piece, but like I felt she had, I don't know, I felt like I was talking to somebody who knew her, because and she had passed. So it was very moving for me.
It's like a bridge.
It is a bridge. It's a bridge for her, but also for me to experience her through somebody else's eyes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And because of, and I'm sure I'm one of, many people this person talks to, and I was able to truly understand that she cared so much about people, not just about doing what she was doing with all of us in this fundraising realm, right?
Right.
And it's very moving because you get to know people on that deeper level. And so my grandmother and I exchanged the story that I told you about, where my Grammy went back to college after I was born, and she was actually the editor of the yearbook, and she had called President Reagan's secretary to see if he would come for graduation, and they worked it out, and they did it, right? And so her dream came true that he handed her diploma when she graduated, and she went on to write plays and books and so forth. And that was her first book, right? And so we were able to share that whole story, and this donor was incredible and shared stories of her experience, right? And to me, it's the people part more than anything, because I felt like I knew her after that.
Yeah.
And I think it's also the belief that anything is possible, because I've seen it happen so many times, right? My grandmother thought, oh, just what's the worst that can happen? They say no, right? And then he comes and he does it, and it's wonderful. I've seen that time and time again with fundraising goals. I've seen that time and time again with these bigger goals that generally to build a museum, and at the same time that the city was building a museum downtown. So that was fun for marketing.
No kidding.
Just a little bit confusing. But I've seen it. It's possible if you have enough people who believe in it and make it work. And there's going to be mistakes along the way. There's going to be fumbles, and it's going to happen. But the people who have the vision and are not afraid to just move forward, take action, and bring the right people along, time and time and time and time again, it's come to fruition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's getting over I talk about this so much. I've just seen it so many times in my life. Building this studio, I had this idea maybe 4 months ago. And this is like October of 24. I was like, I'm going to build a podcast studio. And they're like, what are you going to talk about? And I'm like, I don't know yet, but I think this is a good idea. I think it's going to work. So I got the people together to do it, got the plans all set, got the costs, and went to people to ask for money, and all this things started happening. And then we built it. And then it's like, it's here. Okay, what are we going to talk about? I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. Business is local. I'm going to talk to local people, talk about roofing sometimes, but I'm going to be a figure in the community that brings people together. Just a connector. And podcasting is a way to just connect with people one-on-one. Mm-hmm. Since we're filming it, we can bring it to the mass media, and they can say, oh, Sandy knows Ben knows Sandy. And then bam, our networks can essentially be synergized. And so the people on the junior league watching this, they can see that, oh, I'm a real person that owns a business, and we can talk about things that are not related to either one of our cores, but we can create connections publicly. Yes. It's an interesting thing. It's like networking to the public.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the idea of not being scared to make decisions is what I keep coming back to. When I first started this business about 5 years ago, a lot of trepidation, a lot of fear, but I was like, I'm just going to go for it. And I don't know what's going to come from it. And then once you do that 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, it's like, oh, I get it now. If you just attack life with fervor and with integrity and with passion, something good will come from it. And even when you make mistakes, it's like you learn lessons along the way. It's beautiful. This is life.
And it's God, right?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't do that without the faith that I have, because I feel very much, when I feel deep passion or deep drive, I feel like that's coming from something beyond myself, right? So I feel like God is putting that on my heart. When I ended up doing the foster care, it was right after the financial bubble burst or whatever in 2009. Mm-hmm. And I was laid off, and I prayed, and I was like, what am I going to do next, God? And it was so crazy because I prayed for patience, which I don't recommend, because he'll give you opportunities to be patient. But I was applying for all these big jobs, and I got a great offer, and I was really excited. And then I got this phone call, right? And it changed my life forever. And it was not on my bingo card. It was not on my 5-year plan. Right. What are you going to do with your life? Stop everything and do this. That was not the goal.
What was the phone call?
At 2:00 in the morning, would you be willing to take these 3 children? And I said yes, right? Of course, talking to my husband, and said yes. And
how brave of you. Seriously, I commend you.
And him.
And you guys both. To have no kids and to go from 0 to 3. Yeah.
I'm the oldest of 7 children, so I think that's part of it. And we were we were in a position we were able to do it, and it truly changed the trajectory. Because my husband and I, we had big plans. You know, we got married very young. I always have a 5-year plan, as that's how I ran my life as the oldest of 7. And I always made the joke that, okay, so we had the plan. We got engaged. Jeff was going to finish school. He was going to go back to school for electrical engineering, and we lived in Peoria. So I was like, can you say Caterpillar? You know, this was a no-brainer. And when he graduated, he was going to get his job, and then we were going to start a family, and it had this whole big plan. And God went and kind of said, oh, that's cute, you know. And he's like, here's what we have a lesson for you, and it's going to change your entire life and the trajectory of everything. And so my husband graduated in May of 2009, and we started foster care in November of 2009.
Wow.
And did that for 2.5 years. And then that changed the complete trajectory of my career path and his and what we did. And I'm so thankful for it, because things like that bring you so close to dependence on God, and your community, and recognition of the little things that pile up to make a huge difference.
Yeah. I believe it says in the Bible, have you heard this before? Do not fear or fear not. 365 times. Seriously, 365 times, one for every day. How amazing is that? But fear is often a prison cell that you have the key to get out of, but oftentimes we'll just stay in the box and say, oh, I'm just scared to make this decision. But after you make the decision and get out of that fear box, it's like, why was I ever scared?
Right.
They say fear is a mile wide but an inch deep. Have you heard that before?
Yes.
It's like an ocean that's a mile wide but an inch deep, that once you start walking, you're like, oh, this ain't so bad. And then once you start compiling wins and compiling the history of seeing yourself walk through stuff, it's like, oh, okay, I can do this. And so when I talk to entrepreneurs across the country and they're like, oh man, I'm really scared about this, I'm like, man, just do it. Just do it.
Absolutely.
Come on. Make the decision and go for it. People oftentimes are scared to post on social media. They're like, I know this can help my business, but I'm just scared to get on camera. I'm like, this is what I want you to do right now. To hang up the phone, turn the camera on, press record, and just speak your feelings to the camera and just say something. Because that can seriously connect you to people in a way that you didn't know was possible. And oftentimes people will be like, oh yeah, I didn't ever thought about that, or I connect with that. So it's our own fear that holds us back.
People are hungry for authenticity, and we are surrounded by lack of it.
Yeah.
Because of fear, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think people are wanting to hide themselves. I think they feel most loved when they are seen for who they are, when they're authentic, and that's reciprocated, right? However, the fear of that key that you talk about, I think holds people back a lot.
It does.
And one of the things, by putting yourself out there and being authentic to who you are, you actually draw in my opinion, the people you'd want around you. Yeah. Because it's the most connected you're going to be.
Well, people see that. They see you stepping out of that fear cage, and they're like, well, I want a piece of that.
Right.
And you give courage to people to do the same in their own life. And
Absolutely.
Then, man, the amount of people that I've connected to in the past 5 years through doing social media and just speaking my mind is amazing. My network has expanded tremendously. But there's something happened to me 5 years ago when I wrapped the Tiger truck for the first time. If you guys know the Tiger, you've seen the Tiger trucks.
Yes.
They have big tiger stripes on them. I started driving the first Tiger truck around, and something happened where I was like driving on the street and everybody was looking at me at the intersection. I could just feel it. Even if they weren't looking at me, that's how I felt it was happening. But I was like, I'm here now. Oftentimes in contracting, Sandy, you might not know this, but contractors drive white trucks often with nameless, badgeless, no anything. Because it's like once you come out, if you have a bad job that doesn't go so well, people are like, oh, they don't know who you are. So it takes a lot of risk to put yourself out there in the public to say, this is who I am and this is what I'm doing, and at risk of failure. But once you do that, it's like a switch flipped in my mind of like, oh, anything is possible. And if I just step out in faith and step out of that fear cage, I can literally accomplish anything in my life that I put my mind to. I talked to Dave Alwyn. I was a part of a networking group a couple mornings ago. Dave Alwyn is one of the founders of Echo Valley Meats. So he's been on Shark Tank 3 times. Did you know
I've
that?
seen it. Yeah.
I looked it up afterward. He said it.
He also donates a lot, just so you know.
Good for Dave. Bravo, Dave. But Dave, he said during this meeting, he said, no one's too big. He goes, I've met and struck deals with Mark Cuban. And he goes, I just believe that anything is possible, and I'm not afraid to go after the giants. And I'm like, yes, Dave. That's the attitude.
What's the worst thing they can say is no?
He's the guy from Peoria that went on Shark Tank. Only guy who's been on 3 times. And so, yeah, I'm like, that stuff builds my faith up to say anything's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're doing this now.
I'm doing it now.
Right?
And then, you know what's funny, Sandy, is what happens is once you start things, people are like, oh, that's the guy who does podcasting. But 6 months ago, I did not do this. But they just kind of like put that in their mind of like, oh, this is the guy who does that. This is the guy who does roofing and has a podcast. You are the person who's in the junior league who's creating money for other organizations in Peoria, but you weren't not too long ago.
Right.
So if you just do it, people are like, oh, that's Sandy. She does this.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know any different.
Right. And I think if the identity is you, right, not necessarily what you're doing, because what you're doing here with the podcast, I think, yes, you have the tiger, right? So we're definitely on brand.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Always.
Love it. But with that, you're putting yourself out there beyond the guy who fixes roofs.
That's right.
Right?
Personal branding.
Personal branding. You're an entrepreneur. You're a person people can rely on and trust. And within a community like ours, and maybe they don't like some of the ideas you share or my ideas I share. That has happened. I hate to tell you, that does happen. Okay. It's okay. But then that brings us back to it surrounds you with people who truly build you up, right? Because this networking, you're impressed by him or you wouldn't have mentioned what he did that impressed you, right? Yeah. And somebody else is out there talking about you that way.
He was just a regular guy. That's how he struck me. He's a regular guy. And I had no idea who he was when I sat down. I saw the name Alwyn. I'm like, I'm sure he's, in business with Alwyn's in some way, shape, or form. But when he was talking, I was like, this is just a regular guy who just believes it's possible from Peoria, Illinois.
Absolutely.
So,
and that is the key, though. That's the key with all the different people, your podcast, what he's doing. And I think, we talk about the big mental health issue. Depression is typically feeling guilty or shame about the past, right? And anxiety is fear for the future. So then you're stuck in that in between. Yeah. And the truth is, you think about things a lot more than the other people around you do, right?
That's right.
Not your kids, in your immediate family. I'm saying you do this podcast, and maybe somebody disagrees with a concept or an idea. That's not something they hold on to. You might hold on to it if you feel like there was an oops or something, but they don't, right? And you're always more impressed with the person who starts and tries and does again.
Just try.
I'm always more impressed with that. And I've never met an entrepreneur that had it all figured out the first try.
No.
Not a single one.
No.
And I've never met people that I'm more inspired to learn from, if that makes sense. Yeah. Doctors I'm inspired from and all of that too. But even them, if you're going to be a doctor, if you're going to be a surgeon, you have to be brave enough, right?
Yeah.
To
take the risk.
That's right.
Big insurance policies.
Huge. Yeah. But that's the take, right? You have to do that. And you have to have faith that God has a plan for you. And then, maybe you think you are doing this podcast, but in 2 years you find out this podcast introduced you to someone and now you're doing this whole other piece.
That's right.
Right? And
I'm just actively listening to what people are doing and like receiving the wisdom that they have. It's like multiplication of just my life. I can hear you speaking in some of the things you share, and I'm like, oh, that's good. I'm going to memory bank that for the future. For social media, do you watch videos on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook?
I see things on Facebook and I see some YouTube. I don't do TikTok.
Okay, it's probably a good thing. TikTok's great though. I love TikTok, but there's reels on Facebook, reels on Instagram. After you watch social media for 15 minutes, Sandy, if I were to say, okay, recap what you just watched for 15 minutes, you remember a fraction of what you'd watched. You watch it actively, but you forget about it almost instantly. It just goes to prove that people are not memory banking what you're saying most of the time. They kind of get a feeling about you maybe through that video, but they're not hanging on every word. And I think when people are in fear of producing content or stepping out in their gifts, they think that, oh, everybody's going to judge me for this. And the reality is people have stuff going on.
Everybody does.
Everybody's got stuff, myself included. We just got stuff in our life. So it's like, I'm not thinking about you. I'm not thinking about I'm thinking about myself and my family and my stuff. So fear not.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the key. And I think if you're trying to bring people to the community in a way that shows our positivity, you're doing it right now. You're highlighting good things in the area, right? But we need to multiply that. We need to make that the winning algorithm, right?
Yeah.
and produce more exactly of the good and share it, right?
Yeah. There are people out there, Sandy, I've learned in my time, that just want to see the world burn. They do. They want to talk badly about everything. It's just human nature. And by the way, sometimes I have those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, I'm going to crap on something, but it's like, no, actually, just stop. I'm being a turkey right now. So just
and a lot of times whenever, and like we do this in some of the self-regulation training and things like that we do, a lot of times when children are behaving a certain way, they're acting out their emotions, right? They're acting. Yeah. So let's pull that forward to adults, right? What are we doing if we are just being negative about, we're trying to push away pain, right?
Yes.
So if you are full of gratitude and you're full of the recognition of the gifts and you see what's happened in the past and it's brought you to where you are today and you can see the world that way, your cup doesn't tip over so quickly to that point, right? But that doesn't happen because you exist. It happens because you have been in human connection with another person who's seen you and heard you and sees the good, the bad, the different, right? And still accepts and supports. And that's true for children in the middle of a fit. That's true for adults who are focusing on the negative. That's true for all of us. And the ongoing conversation that I keep pulling is human connection, authentic human connection,
right,
is the missing piece for being brave. So I'm sure you had wonderful parents or somebody in your life who encouraged you to be brave enough to strike out and try this new idea, right? And so when we are encouraged as adults, as children, as a community, we can see the positive, right? We even, as Junior League, a couple years ago, we passed through this logo of like Positive Peoria, and we made a whole logo. It was like the city, and we were going to do a Positive Peoria campaign and start putting it out there for all the things. Because as the Junior League, we didn't do a really good job, frankly, of like putting our logo on everything that we did or whatever, because we weren't worried about that. We knew we were giving it away.
Sure.
Right? So we started doing that a few years ago, but it wasn't because we want the recognition, but we wanted to say, when we go to do the next project, hey, we did this.
Yes.
Let's do this next thing
There's
together.
Our portfolio.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that we could do even more, right?
I've got a company I can connect you with who creates really cool magazines. We're doing it for our company now. That kind of highlights who you are as a brand.
Okay.
It's a 12-page magazine.
Okay.
But it has just information. So we're going to present it to all of our clients here in 2025 that it shows like, here's how we started. Here's our staff. Here is our business portfolio. Here's what we offer. It just gives a really cool handout to say, this is who we are. And it gives depth into who you are in a very quick turn page manner. People can read and digest quickly. But yeah, something like that for the Junior League of like, when I heard the Junior League, you said that, I know in the ether what the Junior League is in a sense. I thought it was women led. But I thought it was more political versus more fundraising. That was the idea.
Well, it's not, I shouldn't say it's not only fundraising. It's essentially community building, right?
No, I get it now.
So yeah, we started in Peoria. The Junior League started in Peoria in 1936. We actually helped with like the first free dental exams for kids to go to school. And now the school has adopted that. We did programs with the Sterling Merit Award, and they've adopted that. So come in and done lots of those pieces. But we've been around since 1936, so we were able to do that museum exhibit in July of 23 at the Riverfront Museum, showcasing that timeline of all the different programs that were launched and the success and all the pieces. And I'll be honest with you, even some of the Junior League members didn't know all the pieces and things that we had done. And it sparked a beautiful engagement, and we doubled our active membership after that first year.
Yeah, because they have something to fight for.
Yeah.
They know what they're fighting for.
Yeah, and they know what we have done and what we can do. It comes back to that belief, right? Yes. That this has been done in the past. And I remember saying at that event, we have one of our members went on to, Joan Krupa went on to sit actually in Congress and be one of the first people to talk about the Family Medical Leave Act back in the 70s, 80s. And that was before we had all the access of things we have today. And they were still able to accomplish all of these things. So when I put the lens on of like, what can we do now? I feel like we are so much further ahead of the game in terms of what we can do now. Yeah. Because there's been examples of people who've come before us who've done it not only in Peoria, but on the broader spectrum. Right. And I think that is motivating too. And even though we're a group of adult women who are very successful in our careers, I think this might be true for men too. You can be very successful in one area and very unsure of yourself in another area.
Sure.
And so it gives them that opportunity to see themselves practice in this other area. And that builds your own ability to think, well, I can do this. And now I learned how to do this. And I can do great for my community. And I'm part of this now. And now I don't want to really leave it, right? Because I did all this. And I love that part of it too, because like I said, 250 members, about 60 active, what we call active right now, which means you do a lot more volunteer work. And we have sustaining members, which means they joined and they did all this work historically, and now they go sustaining, so they're not doing necessarily day-to-day volunteer work.
Right.
But I can still call them up and say, this is what we're looking to do. Who do you know and how can we get that done?
Yes.
And they want to be part of that. It's kind of like what you were telling me the other day is like, people are not mad when you ask them for help or ask them for ideas, right? It's not, they feel appreciated. And if you've worked so hard to do something and accomplish something, and people ask you questions, you're happy to share your information.
Definitely.
Most entrepreneurs are like, let me show you how it's done. It's not a trade secret. It's a strength, a muscle that you've used.
Yes.
And so I hope that by focusing, like with the Junior League now, focusing on youth mental health education in the Tri-County area, investing funds and grants for social emotional learning, providing this direct service, but also providing the advocacy on the bigger front end policy changes and all of that, that we are creating a community where we have the tools. So if we see something we want to change, we don't just put a Band-Aid on it, but we have an entire process of how to execute it and make it better. And I think if I know I can do that, right? And I have a group of 50 or 60 women who all know, oh, we can do this.
Yeah.
You're more likely to be able to take on the bigger challenge, right?
Yes.
And
because you know it's possible.
Right. And, when Race for the Cure started, it was a stigma. You couldn't talk about it openly in public. You couldn't say the word breast in public. And now you can. And we talk about getting your monthly mammogram. And we talk about this. And statistically, we have saved thousands of lives by just removing the stigma.
Yeah.
Right? Because people know it. They talk about it. They openly say it. And there's support for the people. And I am hoping that some of this mental health in the, distant future, I know it doesn't happen overnight, but that I think the generation below us is going to have less stigma than my parents' generation, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I believe by doing that, you really can enact change. But I don't think it happens overnight. No. But because I've seen the past and I'm surrounded by these incredible women that want to do it and are willing to put in the work to look through the policies and to do the coordinating of the details so that we can do it, we're going to see change. Yeah. But I'm going to look back in 10 years and see it.
The past behavior is the biggest indicator of future success. So in a business or in a nonprofit, we have to consistently remind ourselves of what we've been through so that we can say, hey, this may seem hard right now, what we're facing, but look at the past. We've done this before. Therefore, we can do it again. I say this to my team all the time. If we've done it once, we can do it 10 more times. And if we do it 10 times, we can do it 100 times. So we just got to get to a number. We got to go from 0 to 1. And if we get from 0 to 1, we can do it 10 more times in that way. Yes. And sharpen along the way. And then you just get more efficient, more collaborative, more everything. So yeah, past indicators of past behavior is the best indicator for future success. And so it's solving problems of what you're doing on a civic level and doing these processes. I also say this to my team, like winning is a skill that's a muscle memory. Like I'm a big sports fan, so stick with me here. But like winners win and losers lose in sports. If you might not even have the best day or the best game, but if you know how to win, like there's certain quarterbacks in the league that just win games, even when they've had a terrible game or they're playing a better team. They just know how to win at certain moments to win the game. In the same way in business, like people who get stuff done, there's an old saying, if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person.
Yes.
Because they just know how to work. Even if they don't have the specific skill sets to do it, they can know who to find to collaborate with. Mm-hmm. So it's like sharpening that skill, and to your point previously of surrounding yourself with people with different skill sets, having those people in the same rooms that just know how to solve problems, it becomes synergistic. Where you're like, throw it at us. We can do it.
Truthfully, I mean, I have worked, so been in the league like 10 years. When I first started, there was a group of like 3 or 4 ladies that I worked with directly. And when we were getting ready to do this museum event, one of them wasn't even in the league anymore. And I called her, I'm like, you're joining again, and I'm not doing this project without you. And she's like so excited to be called, and she's back, and she did such incredible work. Shout out to Kristen Frederick to support me on that. But it's because we had that synergy. We had worked on it. We saw it through in the beginning, right? And that happens when you've built trust and you've done the work, right? Yes. You've had the opportunity, and this gives us that opportunity. But I want more people, doesn't just mean junior league, but men, women in our community to have that bravery to try, make a mistake and try again.
Right.
I really want that for people because there's no better confidence builder. I mean, throw out the internet. The internet's not a confidence builder, but there's no better ability to train yourself and to get out of that mindset you're talking about, loser winner. There's like victim mentality, or I'm going to find a solution mentality. Yeah. And I grew up with two parents who literally that's all I did. I don't think they had that option in their brain, and so I didn't know people even thought like that until I was older. And what a gift, right? I didn't even know that was a possibility, right? I tell that story about my dad because when I was 8 years old, he was in a motorcycle accident and he lost 80% use of his leg. He couldn't do what he was doing before, and he just didn't give up. And the doctors told him it wasn't going to work. And, he was like, well, I'll figure it out, and he didn't right away. It took about 2 years, but he found himself a chiropractor and a couple different people who were able to find that the problem with his leg wasn't his back. It was actually scar tissue on a nerve on his stomach. They were able to remove that, and he got the use of his leg back. But in the meantime, since he couldn't do what he did before, he's like, well, this isn't working. Let's come up with a solution. So he went back to college for the U of I Springfield and got a paralegal degree. And he opened 2 more businesses. And he said, well, I got a paralegal degree not to become a lawyer, but because they were the only ones who beat me in business. Like I couldn't overcome that piece. So now he can, right? It was just like, oh, well, this worked out for me well. I got more time to learn. Like the attitude and the ability to like, this is not a problem. Okay, this is our hiccup. How are we going to get past that? I watched my mother do that too. Oh my goodness, it took her a long time to graduate college because she kept having all these kiddos. You know what I mean? And those darn kids, yeah. She cares so much, And so when she graduated and she became a biochemist, she went straight to Purdue University and she worked on what I'm going to call like CSI for like rental facilities. Like they take swabs of stuff and they'd send it back to her lab. Well, she made her lab so efficient it went from like a 90-day turnaround to a 30-day turnaround. And she was rocking and rolling at Purdue. She loved that. She went on to Eli Lilly. She ended up discovering a molecule or being authored on one of the people who discovered a molecule. Crazy. But it's almost like the problems were enjoyable. Does that make sense? It does. It's like, I'm so excited that I get to be at the table with this in front of me. How am I going to conquer this?
Yes.
And it was almost building them up to get to do that. So I watched my parents do this, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't know anything different. And I want to give that to adults and children. Like, I think what an amazing gift to think a problem is something that you can conquer. And then every time you do that, you build that muscle.
Yeah. It's so true. And the victim mentality is so pervasive in our culture right now. It's like, just like you can't accomplish things for whatever reason because of either how you were born or what your mentality is or what diseases you have. But then I see people, there's a really famous motivational speaker who has no arms and no legs.
I've seen him.
Have you seen him?
Yes.
And it's like, that guy's talking about anything is possible. He has no arms and no legs. I think he's married.
He is. And he has kids.
Is that nuts? It's like, man, it made me tear up even just watching it. But Tim Tebow created a foundation. Have you seen this before?
Yes.
I'm drawing a blank on the name, but our church last Sunday put on a video that I think they came to Eastview, my church, and they sponsored this. It's a foundation for kids with disabilities, Down syndrome, and a lot of debilitating diseases and syndromes. But they like celebrate these kids like on the red carpet, and they take pictures of them and they dance with them and stuff. And these kids' faces, oh my gosh. It's like Tim Tebow just saw something and just started it, and it's become this massive national event.
Yeah.
And it didn't exist before he started this. He just saw it and said, I'm going to start it one time, and then all of a sudden it blew up across the country. So we have no idea what we're capable of until we step into something and we just say, I'm going to figure it out. And when it happens one time, it happens 10 times, and it multiplies. And I feel like that's what God's calling us forward to do is like obtain the impossible.
Yes.
I wrote that on my sheet at the same networking event. It said, what is your goal for your business? Like, what's your why? And I put obtain the impossible. 5 years ago, I thought it was impossible to have this level of success. And guess what? When I got here, I'm like, how much farther can I stretch this? I think I can go bigger, better, more efficient, everything. So I'm just scratching the surface. I'm 35 years old. I got a lot of time in front of me. I have no idea what's going to come from this podcast, but I'm enjoying it because I get to talk to other people in that same mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, when I hear these stories over and over, it reinforces this idea that people who win and just do stuff didn't know how to do it before they started. Most of the time, they're like, I just have this idea and I'm going to do it. And then guess what? They become professionals after 5, 6, 7 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Peoria is a great place to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is.
It is.
It really is. And I think you're going to be very surprised at, because you're doing this and you're being authentic the way you are, and then you're bringing, like you say, similar mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're going to be surprised at people that start reaching out to you. I hope that the people who hear this, honestly, if there's any ladies out there that want to join the league, we'd love to have you. juniorleagueofpeoria.org, learn more about us. And then also, if there's anybody out there who knows of a place that we should reach out to send this opportunity for Healthy Minds, Healthy Neighborhoods, or they can think of a school that's in need, for example, of one of these things I was talking about for social emotional dogs, or the yoga classes, or they need celebration things for the children, whatever that is, reach out. We want to build our platform of what we can do together. Mm-hmm. We're doing this all through March, and then in April we're having our fundraiser in Peoria Heights, the Sip and Stroll.
Yeah, that's been going on for a while.
Yeah,
No?
That's the second year.
Okay, I saw that last year. I didn't come, but I saw it advertised.
Well, you're welcome to come.
Yeah.
You're real close.
Yeah.
And all of it is just to raise money for all these things, and all the money stays local, right?
Right.
And I say that's the same thing I say about business owners locally, right? All the money stays local. You live here, right? You pay taxes here. You support
Unfortunately.
here.
Yeah. No.
But you know what I mean? Like it's
totally.
all here,
Yep.
and we are really supporting each other in that. And it goes. That's the macro level of it. But I don't think, to speak of the village or the community, I don't think the person who owns the big company that has their 50th location here is going to come and shovel your driveway, right?
Right.
It's going to be your neighbor. It's going to be the local business owner. Or if there's a big, windstorm that goes through and a bunch of people lose their roofs, they're not going to call the people in the other place. They're going to call you.
There's a big, I don't know if you know this, in the trades specifically, this is happening all across the country, where businesses that have been started by somebody 30 years ago are at retirement age now.
Oh, I heard about this.
It's huge. So businesses, they're projecting that in like 10 years, a large swath of small businesses will be sold or will just cave and just go out of business. And these are businesses that people count on. So they will either be sold to a large corporation or just close down. And it's going to be a massive hit unless the younger generations buy them, take them over. And those are things that we need in our local area. I don't want to call a corporation for things if a local business can do it. I don't want to do that. I think most people would agree with that.
Yeah.
Because your money's circulating in your local economy. I had our furnace breakdown, like I said, last night, and a local company came out, and a nice local kid that lives down the street from me who repaired my furnace. And it's just cool to meet people and say, yeah, this is my guy who does this, and this is, I don't want these businesses to go under because there's no one to take them over. And so it requires a level of skill and a level of risk to own businesses and to take that leap into serving the public.
Absolutely.
Which, by the way, scary sometimes. Yeah. Some of you guys out there kind of ruthless, but I'm here. I'm not giving up. Ever. And so, yeah, it's a level of responsibility. I'm sure you feel the same, where you're serving the public in your way and you're with your skill set, and that comes with its bumps and bruises. But you're doing it because you love the city that you live in.
Absolutely, and I love the people that have become my community here. Right. Because I moved here, like I said, in 2004. So I grew up in Southern Illinois, and I went to Millikan and Decatur, and then I was offered my first position with a company called Federated, and the training was in Minnesota. But I landed here in Peoria, and it has been, it's a God moment. I mean, my grandmother at the time when I moved here was in Canton, and she had just, they had just retired, and so they came and visited me, and I had this whole little connection of people. But other than that, I had to make my network, right? Mm. That's one of the reasons I joined the Junior League. I wanted to meet people that I wasn't selling anything to, right?
Right.
And I found my church, and I found my people. And the thought of going anywhere else at this point in my life just feels wrong. Not that I love a new challenge. Sure. I love a new idea, but I think about my children and the roots that they get here and the community that we built. And I often say to them, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Sometimes you have to make decisions that are best for everybody. And I have chosen this little community, and it has been, that's why I want to support it. I want to support the families. I want, I live in Washington now, and they're very bonded. There was this big tornado thing that happened. I'm sure you heard about.
2015, was it?
13.
13, okay.
Yeah. And a huge bond became, and talk about helping your neighbor and all those things, right? And that filtered into so many other areas. And I believe that community, and you have kids, as they get older, they need other adults too, that are telling them, not just their parents, and encouraging them and being mentors and all that. When I was a kid, I had the head economist at ADM actually let me job shadow him for a day to learn about that whole process. I was fascinated. They had the stock wall, all the light up across the room. We had to learn all about that. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I didn't have a group of friends that I had grown up with, done slumber parties with, and they all knew each other, right? And I had this great opportunity. So I want that for my children. I want that for my community. I want that for our city, right? And I do believe that your mentality can become contagious.
Yes.
Good or bad.
Agreed.
And I think what you're taking action on, people will be drawn to that.
Whatever you're looking for, you're going to find it.
Exactly.
So if you're looking for negativity, if you're looking for good grief, you're going to find that.
Absolutely.
I've been there before. And if you're looking for people that are making an impact, you're going to find them.
Absolutely.
It's like your vision changes. It's kind of like the same thing, like you said earlier today. You saw the roof tiger truck for the first time, and then you said, I can't not see them anywhere. I see them all over the place.
Everywhere I go now, I see it.
It's like your vision change. It's like, oh, I know that person. I know that car. Going back to what you said about moving cities, I've seen a lot of people move away from the area because of high taxes here, which, by the way, we need to lower those. High property taxes. The local economy, I don't think is growing at a sustainable pace yet. There's a lot of problems in the Peoria area. People are like, I'm going to move to Florida. I'm going to move to Texas. I'm going to move to those other places.
Right.
I'm committed here. My kids are here, and I'm going to die here, hopefully. And so I don't plan to move. People are like, the weather's really harsh and the winters are really bad. Oh, yeah, but it makes you really thankful for the spring and fall.
It does. It's the gratitude piece.
Gratitude.
It's built in.
There's two different ways to see this. You talk to people like this, Sandy, and not to throw shade, but it's like, they're like, oh, it's too cold. And then when it's the summer, it's too hot.
Yes.
So when they keep whining, I'm like, no, I'm going to say something right now. When it's too hot, I'm like, makes you really thankful when it's 15 below. I'll take this weather any day over 15 below. So it's like, change your perception of what's happening. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you'll be really grateful for this warm weather or for these summers or do we have a hot summer and a cold winter? Sure. We have this beautiful fall weather and this beautiful spring. Hopefully it lasts more than 2 weeks. Some of those falls were really quick. But like, change your perception of what you see, and all of a sudden you become really thankful for what you have. Because you're not living in a really desolate third world country. How about that?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and we do this thing at my house. We call it rose, thorn, bud. I'm not the only one. I didn't invent this, but we do this with my kids. What was your rose of the day? What was your thorn? Because I also don't think you can walk around with rose-colored glasses all the time and pretend there's no problems. Because once again, to me, the problem is the thing that's the challenge that I can solve and make better, right? But you still have to see the good. So we do the rose, we do the thorn, and we do the bud. What are you looking forward to, right? And so we go around our table and we do that at dinner, and it's fun with the kids. So they're just trained now. They're trained for gratitude. They're trained, we're gonna do it. And all of that to say that it really is what you practice daily.
Yeah.
Right? Just like working out a muscle for exercise or anything else, you have to do that. And you're putting positive content out there, and then solutions to problems. Like you said, you weren't saying nothing's, everything's perfect. You said taxes are high. That's not working for me. Let's do something about that.
It's just what it is, right?
I mean, you're not wrong though. Per capita, Peoria is one of the highest tax places from a property tax perspective.
Illinois from the states, number one, right? Number one state in the country for property taxes.
Yeah.
We're number one.
Aren't we? We're so special.
Yes.
but there's this other piece of, Chicago's attached and so forth, right? And I'm sure people in different places that have large cities also feel the same. Like I'm sure like LA versus, Northern California is a different kind of feeling, right?
Yeah.
I also don't want anybody to lose hope because of those things, right?
Sure.
So that's a problem, but it's not unsolvable.
No.
Right? It's something that if we all band together, we can do something about.
Right.
You know how you said that all these businesses, the guys are going to retire, the families are going to retire, and it's not going to go to the next generation. So my dad's business, that's kind of how that went down. So I know a lot about that.
Yeah.
And it was bought up by a bigger place, and you know the story, and then it becomes someone you don't know, right? I think we're seeing that with homes as well.
Yes.
And
I just had a neighbor who sold his house, and I was like, it's 4 houses down from us. It's a really tight neighborhood. And I was like, who bought the house? And he's like, I'm not sure. And then a couple weeks later, he got back to me. He's like, it's actually an investment company from Chicago.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a family home, 4-bedroom, 3-bath, This is not like a rental property. And some guy bought it to rent it out. And I'm like, that stinks. I want to have neighbors who are committed to the neighborhood so I can know them and meet them, not have families switch out every 2 years. It stinks that that's the case. I hope there's laws passed in the future to prevent this.
Right.
Because it's not fun to have rentals. I won't have long-term committed people in your neighborhood.
Well, and not for nothing, but isn't that the American dream?
It's the American dream. Own
right?
your house.
Own your house and have all the pieces,
That's right?
And I agree. I think we can do something about it, but that's a problem. So then we take it on, right? What do you want to take on? Are you the expert for that? Figuring those pieces out. But I bet in these conversations, you're going to find a person who is.
Hopefully so.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the piece. And we're big enough to have all the great things, the Civic Center, the teams, all the things, right? But we are small enough that you can probably find that person.
Yeah. Back to gratitude, I was just thinking about this. I did a presentation maybe a year and a half ago, and I opened up my speech. This is going to sound crude, but I promise it's not. It was a slide of a sperm cell. And in an ejaculation, there's 200 million to 500 million individual sperm cells. So if you are born, you won the lottery. To be born, you were one of 200 million to 500 million. So to even be here and to actually understand what I'm saying and to live in this great country, it's a percentage of a percentage of a percentage. We're talking about nths of a percentage. So we should be grateful of that. And I know people's circumstances are tough right now. I know there's stuff happening in the world. I know and
there are true victims.
True victims. There's hard stuff happening. I understand. But the next level of our development as human beings is to know that we have control over certain parts of our life. Sometimes it's really small, sometimes it's large. But we can make an impact on our current circle of influence. And by proxy, you can sort of grow that circle of influence to make larger and larger impacts. So that's my goal.
Well, and to your point, you won the lottery there, and then you're born, and then which that also is winning the lottery to actually make it to the being born part.
Good point.
Right?
There's a percentage of people who pass away before they get born. Yeah.
Right. And the other piece is like we're in also a time period where you can take a hot shower.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is so silly, but 30 years.
So true.
There was a year it didn't happen. There was
TV
running
is
water.
$200.
Right.
Crazy.
Like all of this access and entertainment, and it's kind of like the news is too much. Sometimes having too much comfort.
Too much.
It distracts you from that the bond and the human need.
Yeah.
Right?
There was a report that just came out. Sandy, maybe you saw it. It was like, I think it's 41% of people in this country are extremely proud to be American. 41%. It's very low.
Yeah.
But the younger you are, the less proud you are. And the older you are, the more proud you are to be an American, because older people, I think, grew up in a time where we didn't have as much good. So even my kids don't know a time with a landline or with dial-up internet or with no internet at all. I didn't have internet till I was 13 years old. It's like I grew up a lot playing outside because I didn't have that. They have no idea that commercials came on through TV,
I was the mom who put
spoiled.
those back on.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me, I'm like, they don't need any more instant gratification in their life. Okay, they're fine.
And by the way, it's kind of fun to like run to the refrigerator to grab your drink before the commercials stop. It's like this thing, you got to get back.
Well, and you remember even TV shows, we used to like, must see TV Thursday night or whatever, and then we'd all go talk about it, and it created human connection.
Yes.
Where it's the pull away now. It's that 7-second attention span. It's it's those things. No, so imagine you've got a big problem and you have a 7-second attention span to fix it. How are you going to actually hold on to wanting to do that?
Yeah.
Because that's not easy, but that's easy.
Yeah.
And so we build these little forts for ourselves to make ourselves comfortable, but they're actually little prisons. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Get uncomfortable.
Yeah, get uncomfortable. It's good for you. It's good for you. It's when you grow. It's when your stress happens. You know what I mean?
Life begins at the end of our comfort zone.
Very good.
Yeah. There's a magnet that I saw in a refrigerator one time.
I love it. I love it. It's so good. It's so good. But I truly appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah.
I really do.
I appreciate what you're doing. It's fun to meet other people who are making impact. And the Junior League of Peoria is something that now that I'm enlightened, I will be paying more attention to your guys' fundraising, and I'll be a part of it. So happy to commit to that, and looking forward to seeing what you guys are going to do for the future.
Awesome.
Yeah. Sandy Garza, thanks so much for coming on the Tiger Den.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben.